Hi everyone. I'm going to be talking about something for the next couple of weeks. I noticed something interesting when I was telling you the story of Cinderella and other stories similar to Cinderella. At the end of each of those stories, there was talk of a king, a queen, a prince, a princess, and royalty. And there was some interest in that. So I thought I would take some time the next few weeks to talk about kings, queens, and kingdoms. So listen as I show you some pictures and tell you a little bit about some kings in Europe.
Look at this fancy building. Can you believe that this was actually someone's house? Well, it's not just any house, it's a palace. This palace used to belong to a queen of France. What do you think it's like inside? It must be nice if it were built for a queen. In fact, this palace has 440 rooms inside. As the leaders of their countries, kings and queens often had the biggest and best homes in the land, known as palaces or castles. As the leader, the king or queen rules a particular area of land and the people who live there. This area of land is called a kingdom. There used to be many, many kingdoms in the world. Today, however, there are not as many kingdoms or kings and queens as there used to be. It's good to be king. That's an old saying, and if you look at this king, whose name is King Richard II of England, you begin to get the idea of why this saying holds true. If you walked into a palace in England 300 years ago and saw this person, you wouldn't have any trouble guessing he was king. As the most important and powerful people in their kingdoms, kings and queens always got the best of everything. The best houses, the best clothing, and the best food. Kings did not have to say please and thank you. They didn't even have to dress themselves. They had servants do that for them. Pretty much everything a king used or queen touched or owned was called royal. The soft, fluffy robes King Richard II wore were the royal robes. The cup he drank from was called the royal cup. And if it was royal, that meant that only the king, queen, or someone else in the royal family, such as his daughter, the princess, or his son, the prince, was allowed to use it. King Richard II is holding two things in this picture. In one hand, he is holding the royal orb, and in the other, he is holding the royal scepter. These were ceremonial objects or things that the king wore or held just to remind people who was in charge. That hat he is wearing is called a crown, which is no ordinary hat. Crowns were usually made out of some kind of precious metal like gold or silver and decorated with fancy jewels like rubies and emeralds and sapphires. These jewels were called the crown jewels. Like the scepter and the orb, the crown was an important symbol of the king's power. Here is a close-up picture of a crown. It's made of gold and loaded with fancy pearls and other jewels. A hat like this would not be good for keeping the sun out of your eyes, and it wouldn't be very good at keeping your head warm, but if you were wearing it, it meant you were the king or queen, the ruler of the kingdom. A few hundred years ago, it would have been nice to be king or queen ruling your very own kingdom, making all the rules and laws that people had to follow, but it would also have been very difficult. Kings and queens had big responsibilities. Every day, people came to them to ask for money or advice. And every day they had to make important decisions about things that were happening in the kingdom. A famous king named Charlemagne was so important to us that an artist made a stained glass window with his image. Look at his fancy chair. The king's chair was called a throne, and, as you might imagine, only the king was allowed to sit there. His throne was raised up on a platform so he would appear tall and important even when he was sitting down. What's that in his hand? Charlemagne is holding a sword and an orb to remind people that he is the king. Over the next couple of weeks, you will learn more about kingdoms, kings, queens, and everything having to do with royalty.
As I was telling you those things, there were a few words that came up that I wanted to go over with you just to make sure you understood what they meant. And so I wrote some of them down. The first one here, I wrote rules. Now, we did a unit on being a good citizen and rules and laws. And that is kind of the same thing here, a rule, like no running in the hallway, no knocking down your friend's black tower. Well, a king or a queen came up with the rules of the people around them. They decided what rules needed to happen for the people that lived in their area. That also meant that they ruled over them, kind of like, I'm in charge, what I say goes, I come up with the rules, all of you must follow them. The other word I have here is palace, or like a castle, like a giant fancy building where someone might live. 440 rooms, did you catch that? That's huge. Next is kingdom. So the king's palace or castle is in a spot, kind of maybe in the middle of the kingdom. So all of the places around all the people, the regular people who live in their houses and their neighborhoods and their villages, they are all part of the kingdom. So there's the giant castle and the king in there that makes up all the rules for all the people around. This word is servants. A servant is somebody who works for the king or queen that gets paid to do a job, but they do all of the things that the king and queen don't want to do, like getting dressed in the morning. Kings and queens sometimes didn't dress themselves. They had someone do it for them. They'd put out their arms and say, dress me. Or maybe they would be the ones definitely cleaning. Kings and queens would never. A king or a queen wouldn't even make their own bath to clean themselves. They wouldn't even turn the water on or bring the hot water to the tub. They would have their servants do it for them. And the last word right here is royal. Royal is anything that belongs to the king or the queen. A royal throne, only for the king to sit on, nobody else. A royal hairbrush, only for the princesses or the queen. A royal robe, a royal horse. Maybe that's the horse that only the king rides. So we talk about kings and queens in the past quite often, but are there kings and queens around still today? Yes, there are kings and queens, not as many as there once was.
Here are some examples of some modern day royalty. You'll see kings and queens and princes and princesses. They look just like regular people from different countries. They do seem to be wearing fancier clothes and live in fancier places. And they also seem to usually have a lot of people around them. Doesn't seem like they get to sit down and relax too often. Good kings and queens want to make sure that the people around them are happy and healthy. They want them to be successful, so there's probably a lot of work to do.
Now that you've been thinking about kings and queens, I wonder how you would feel if you were a king or a queen. I wonder what would be the good things or the bad things about it. I think one of the good things is the fancy stuff. I think it's kind of cool to wear fancy dresses and have fancy jewels and all of that and live in a fancy place. It'd be cool to have a giant castle that was yours. It would be nice not to have to clean anymore. I do think that there would be some bad things about being royalty. You are royal, you want your kingdom to be doing well. The people who live under your rule, you want them to be happy and healthy. And it might be hard. You might have to make some hard decisions about who gets what extra money, what rules are. I would have a hard time making rules, I think. It would be kind of fun, though, just to imagine the good parts of being royalty. Thank you for learning with me, and I will see you next time. Bye.